The ABCs of performance-based contracting case study. Raise your hand if you love doing the same repetitive task, hour after hour, day after day. Well, artificial intelligence may be taking on some of those tasks in the near future. I suggest that as a contract professional, we need to become experts at drafting, negotiating, and managing complex contract structures. Performance-based contracts are just that complex contract structure. Now, it's going to be years before artificial intelligence in the form of a large language model will be programmed effectively enough to replace human beings who can work with complex contracts. Artificial intelligence, however, will automate our contracting repetitive tasks. Soon, they may even be able to negotiate or draft simplistic types of contracts. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Jeanette Neiden, a contract attorney. I train contract professionals, usually non-lawyers, to negotiate complex commercial contracts with confidence. I'm the author of 4 business books all about negotiating complex contracts and the owner of a negotiation skills training company, Neiden on Negotiation. So here's the challenge that one of my clients brought to me. What happens if you don't know or your team doesn't know if you have performance-based contracts? But part of your mandate is to tighten up supplier performance. Well, that's exactly the place one manager found herself in when she joined a new team. If you or members of your team don't know what a performance-based contract is, no worries. This case study series will provide you with the tips, techniques, and guidance to work effectively with performance-based contracts. This manager was leading a team that had a huge variety of contracting skill sets. Several team members were experienced at buying only physical goods, but were not at all familiar with any of the more complex contracts. Their standard purchase order just had the terms literally on the back, right? Several of their team members, though, were working with performance-based contracts, but they didn't even know it. So no one in the team had the language for explaining what a performance-based contract is to new or less skilled team members, and they did have some new team members joining at an entry level. So the new manager's mandate to improve supplier performance is intersected with this need to have all the skills on the same page, and she wanted an elegant contract. So her first question to me was this: how do you define a performance-based contract to people who have a range of familiarity with contracts? A performance-based contract is a class of agreements where payments for goods and services is contingent on the supplier achieving clearly outlined performance goals or desired outcomes. Now, this is different from paying a supplier for one-off delivery, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, typically, a performance-based contract contains the 5 following critical components: a performance work statement, or a performance-based statement of work, or a technical specification. 2, a quality assurance surveillance plan of some sort. 3, performance-based metrics. 4, contractual incentives or disincentives. And 5, a pricing model. The goal of a performance-based contract is to align the business objectives with the specifications or technical terms in the statement of work and the contract terms and conditions. Now, alignment means ensuring all the elements of the supplier's work are included in that statement of work or technical specification. All the risks associated with that work are then also addressed in the contract terms and conditions. Then that performance-based contract becomes a flexible vehicle to manage performance after the contract is executed. So no, your team is not putting that contract in the drawer to never see it again until you get a reminder that it's time to renew. These contracts are things that you take out of the drawer. We have reports that have to be filed and reviewed. There are quarterly business reviews. There are annual business reviews. There are all kinds of ways in which we interact in these kinds of performance-based agreements that can adapt to changing circumstances in the supply chain. The key to your team's success is to make sure that the supplier understands its role and responsibilities to deliver the work. This is true for the customer-facing contract professional or contract manager and the supplier-facing account manager. These two functions have to be able to work together, being able to understand what those clearly identified deliverables are, what the corresponding expectations for quality are, what the corresponding performance measurements are, how work will be incentivized, is it bonus or gain sharing, or what the disincentives are, such as liquidated damages or service level credits. We also have to understand that this is not a price, but a pricing model, right? A price is you go to the grocery store or some similar type of superstore and you push your cart down and the price for an object is right there for you on the shelf. Performance-based contracts don't have a price. They have a pricing model, and elements of work may have a price and elements of the work may not have a fixed price, because it might need to be a direct cost pass-through, so we won't know until the cost is passed through what it is. Might be on a T&M basis. We know what the fully burdened hourly rate is, but we might not know what the total cost is because we couldn't estimate what that level of performance was before we agreed to a time and materials pricing model. All of these combined together is what makes it a complex contract, a performance-driven contract, a very powerful vehicle, and somewhat complex. So the big aha was the reason supplier performance was suffering was that the business owners, the stakeholders in the line of business, were not writing good statements of work. Her company lost that skill with recent attrition in the workplace, and what her team was getting was incomplete. So no wonder her company gave her the mandate to improve supplier performance. So when we started to look at the work requirements and the details, and we realized that that wasn't necessarily as well written as it should be, then the rest of the corresponding performance suffered as well. Writing really good performance work statements or statements of work technical specifications is way harder than a description in a purchase order or a purchase requisition in an SAP type of a system. And that's really all these business owners knew how to do, is to write more simplistic line items. So we needed to be able to include more sophisticated performance work statements, technical specifications to drive supplier performance. That's why we needed to understand what a performance-based contract was and identify who understood how to work with them so that we could revise them or reissue them to be tighter and more driven towards supplier performance. So it's going to be up to you to determine just how far your team should go in helping the business owners in making the decisions about performance-based statements of work. Now, this manager had no choice but to get her own team members involved in helping to write the statements of work. And that's where I have come in to help mentor in drafting these types of statements of work. Now, what they also determined is that they were going to have to triage their workload. So they needed to identify those high value, high risk contracts. In their case, that combined the purchase of goods with wraparound services of some sort as requiring all 5 elements of a performance-based contract. In that way, they were able to identify a manageable workload to enhance the drafting of the performance work statement, technical specification, and then enhance supplier performance. Are you working with performance-based contracts? Look at the contracts that you or your team draft, negotiate, or manage to identify the 5 elements. Are all 5 elements there? If they are, then ask your company if it's getting the value it needs from this agreement. If not, something needs to be rewritten or renegotiated or managed better. And if one of those elements is missing, which is not unusual, please identify what you can do personally to insert that missing element, either through a contract renegotiation or upon re-award. Now, if you're a supplier, this absolutely applies to you. Every supplier I've ever worked with wants to perform, make a profit, deliver value, and to continue to work with your valued customers and clients for years to come. Properly structured and managed performance-based contracts will ensure your long-term success. Don't be afraid of them and don't agree to an incomplete performance-based contract. Are you interested in learning more? Well, I also have a webinar series, a manager training series, also based on performance-based contracts. Look at the link here to watch that webinar. And stay tuned. I'm going to have more case studies every month on different elements of performance-based contracting. If you just want to get down to the bottom line, I have a manual. And if you want to learn at your own pace, you can purchase the manual. Your copy of The Contract Professional's Playbook, the definitive guide to maximizing value through mastery of performance and outcome-based contracting, right here. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn, to connect with me through YouTube, or even to check out my website. I look forward to talking to you more about my favorite topic, complex contracts.